This week, we're going to be talking about the relationship between marketing and sales. Obviously, I am a marketer. My guest today is in sales, but I will let her introduce herself. So I will hand over to Kristen.
I'm Kristen Hoffman. I am a senior account executive at NetLine Corp. I am based in the U.S. I actually your first U.S. guest on this show.
You are indeed our first U.S. guest. So there you go. First female and first U.S.
Look at that. Cool. So yeah, I'm at a company called NetLine. I specialize in marketing services.
So we actually connected via LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And then we got talking, and then I guess over the last few weeks, couple of months maybe, we've just spoken from time to time each week on one of my posts or one of your posts, or you've tagged me in something or vice versa, which got us to talking about potentially you coming on the podcast. When I started it, I think you've sort of followed that journey since we started it. So that's sort of a bit of background about getting you on the podcast. And as I said at the start, we're going to be talking about the sort of, like you said, the evolution of sales and marketing, and how marketing or sales rely on marketing, and how that's going to change in 2022, 2023. So I think the first thing to sort of cover would be, let's set the scene of a standard relationship between marketing and sales. I mean, you sell to marketers, so that's an interesting dynamic as well. But what would you say is the standard out the box, off the shelf setup between sales and marketing today?
Yeah. So with the caveat that, of course, every organization is different. I find that sales and marketing teams tend to have some of the best opportunities to learn from one another. And the teams that choose to actively learn from one another, right? The teams that are, relaying information back and forth smoothly, those tend to be those who, tend to be really on top of it. They really get their audience. They have the data. Marketing may have that data to back up, hey, this is who our audience is, and this is who this is how they're engaging. And sales, and specifically those in full cycle and SDR roles, they're the boots on the ground, and they're saying, hey, yeah, this data you gave us, it tracks, it makes sense, but this is what I'm hearing when I go to this ICP. And, this is the feedback that I'm getting. So in that kind of perfect situation, it can be a really great feedback loop. Now, we're not always in that perfect situation, right? And there can be times where just, different sets of, different KPIs or different goals can make it so that feedback doesn't exactly happen as it's supposed to, right? And that's when you can start to get that breakdown of, we've all heard it. Sales is complaining that marketing isn't giving them great leads, and marketing is complaining because sales isn't following up on the leads. And then it becomes kind of this, a back and forth around, around a single concept, and a very short term or short-sighted concept. When in reality, when you're looking at kind of that long-term growth or that long-term engagement, there can be so much, you can learn so much from one another.
I was going to just sort of pull up one of those points that you made, where you often get this ping pong tennis match, that fight, that back and forth that you spoke about between sales and marketing. And I think I've worked in a few different companies now. The company that I work in is right now is a startup. The previous companies I've worked in were very much at least 30, 40 years old, big companies where there was a marketing function and a sales function that were, tens of people. And what I've found is since moving from those old school or just sort of legacy companies is that the relationship there was a lot worse than it is in the tech startup, the more modern company. Now, as you said, I know that is a case by case, a company by company sort of setup. But do you find that when you're speaking to companies that potentially some of the slightly older legacy companies have worse relationships than some of these new companies that may have demand gen as a role, for example, or do you not see that?
One thing that I have noticed is, the makeup of, let's say, a startup and a legacy organization can be really different. So when I think startup, I think lean. I think, to your point, it's, perhaps maybe it's a marketing team of half a dozen and like a sales team that matches that. It tends to be leaner. So there can be a lot of times that lends itself to having that sort of better, those better communication channels around, hey, this is working, this isn't working, right? When you look at your legacy companies, and this is based on my experience, I've actually, I don't have a lot of experience in the startup space. I've actually always been with legacy companies. And one thing that I always kind of learned from those was you may not necessarily have like a super close alignment just due to the size of the company, right? And the sheer number of folks. But there's more of an opportunity to learn from others who may not be in sales or marketing. They may be in events. I came from media. They may be in editorial. They may be in operations. So there can be more of that opportunity to learn from different areas, and use those pieces to kind of help, with your go-to-market, approach. So, that's just one thing that I've picked up from personal experience. In terms of like my day-to-day and who I work with, it tends to be across the board. There are a lot of smaller startups, that are eager to talk. But there are also, some big names, some legacy organizations that are also looking to talk. And I find that in terms of strategy and tactics, they don't really change. It's just, how can we use these tools and tactics to help us be top of mind or reach that audience or build that authority? What I will say is I am a big believer in personally raising my hand and saying, hey, I don't understand this, or, can I have a little bit more information around this? Or, hey, what do you think about using this type of strategy to get in front of this particular audience? And I have found in my professional career that, as a sales rep, that's helped me quite a bit. Just like, hey, how can I work with the folks who are maybe not necessarily being gold on the exact same thing, but they have the same overall goal. What can I learn from them? What can they tell me? And just having those casual conversations as a way to just learn more and build that rapport.
Are you talking about better understanding their job and what they are KPI to do, so that you can, I guess, better inform your day-to-day, your job, your sort of deliverables?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. I was talking to one of my colleagues who's actually on the partnership side about a week ago, and I know that she was looking into different types of software for a project that she was working on. I work with marketers every day who are looking to get their software potentially in front of their audience. So I just, I called her up and said, hey, like, what is your process been? You know, if you're looking and you're trying to find, you know, this software in a crowded space, like, what are you actually looking for? What is jumping out at you? And like, what's worked, what hasn't? And you know, we had a really good conversation about, you know, her specific approach, you know, to searching and testing, and you know what goes into that decision making process. And you know, I think as a sales rep and as a marketer too, you know, curiosity is going to be what really stands out and can be a really great driver in your career.
I think no, it's an interesting thing you were saying there about speaking with someone in a different department, whatever that might be, let's say partnerships or marketing, to understand their logical thinking behind something that they're a campaign or activity that they're running. But there's a perfectly, it's a constant, never-ending cycle if you think about it between sales and marketing, because I would listen to sales on the phone and I would listen to calls to understand what our ICP is saying. And then that would fuel potentially an improved message. And in me improving that message online or in our campaigns or in our podcasts or in our content, we may create more demand to then go back through into sales. So it's almost a never ending cycle between the two departments if you really, really, really think about it.
And it should be when you're in sales, it's okay. What do I do to get, what do I do to create that interest? What do I do to get that call back? What do I do to set that call? What do I do to get that proposal? What do I do to close? Right. And it's kind of plodding along. You're plodding along to an endpoint. But to your point, it's so much more than that, right? You may be plodding along to that endpoint on one specific deal or with one specific account, but it's always evolving and it's always changing. You don't close that deal, then suddenly you wash your hands of it and okay, I learned what I needed to learn, lather, rinse, repeat. It's okay, what did I learn from this? What can I do to apply it to my next that next cycle? And how can we always be, using this information to evolve that process? I mean, for example, this podcast right here, I'm sure you have learned just in these 7 episodes, you have learned some really cool things that it's like, oh, wow, I perhaps hadn't thought about that. Or, I'm going to bring that back to my sales team, or, let's put a pin in this and, dig into that a little bit more. And it's something that perhaps wouldn't have come up if this wasn't something that you're actively chasing or actively looking to learn about.
No, I mean, it was actually this week that one of our CS guys mentioned that one of the customers said, "Oh, by the way, loving the podcast,
awesome,
so keep it up." And it's that direct feedback that comes from client success, which is a form of sales. That comes back into me, that sits in marketing, that will drive or influence the content of the future of in the next sort of 3 months, 6 months, which could then again attract more people. It could educate our existing customers or educate potential new customers. And again, it's just that direct relationship between the two departments. So in terms of, I guess for those that are potentially in companies that don't necessarily have the best relationship between marketing and sales for whatever reasons, I think from my personal experience, it seems to be that if a marketing lead closes in sales, historically sales would be like, no, that's our deal, that's our revenue, and marketing would be like, well, that's our revenue, and you're almost fighting over it. But like we've already said, it's one number, it's one team. So for those that are stuck in the middle of that battle between sales and marketing, have you noticed any tips, or have you seen any actionable sort of methods to better bridge the gap or better connect the two teams?
My first job, I had this boss, and gosh, I remember him telling me this in his office, and I think about it every day. Like, no lie, I think about it every day. He said, there's always a natural push and pull between sales and, his example was production, because I was in SEO and e-marketing. There's always going to be this natural push and pull between sales and production, or sales and marketing. And that's just the way it is. Some days things may lean a little bit more towards sales. Some days it may lean a little bit more towards marketing. But what I learned from that is you put your sales skills to use. It's what can I do personally to, help facilitate that outcome that I want? It's okay, well, maybe I do reach out to this team and learn a little bit more about their day-to-day. Let's talk. And it doesn't always need to be like, hey, these are the 3 things that I need from you right now to close this deal. It's just get to know your teammates on more of that personal level. And to me, at least, I know that's always helped. That can go a long way. It's building, they say sales is all about personal relationships. The same thing goes for within your internal teams. Sales reps, marketing doesn't only exist to send you information. It is a core part of the organization. It is building that brand. It's building that message. It's getting out to many potential eyes, many potential customers, so you can have those one-to-one conversations and close, and use that information to help you grow, because there's a lot to learn out there.
It's interesting you talk about the building that personal rapport between the two departments, or key members of the team, because I actually sit in the middle of the CS and sales team in the office. And at first, it was basically the desk that was free when I first joined the company.
I wonder why.
But there's been 2 or 3 desk moves since then, and I've chosen to stick with the sales and CS teams, because the amount of stuff that I hear on the phones and the amount of things that we talk about after phone calls or just day to day in that 40 hours a week that we're in the office is unbelievable. And what that then means is they don't mind tapping me on the shoulder and say, look, I've just had this really good call. But I'm thinking, it could have been better if we did this, or it could have been better if I perhaps had something that was very slightly different to what we've already got, or someone mentioned something on the website that didn't quite make sense. And then I can go and have a look at it and think, well, that's great feedback. You didn't have to phone me or walk upstairs and speak to someone you've never met. And because we have that, really great relationship, things get actioned a lot more quickly. Things are far more, I guess I'm more open to things. They're more open to things, because we sit next to each other every single day, which has been a massive, massive help.
I love that, because, speaking from that sales side, it's, we have revenue goals. In some places you have activity goals. So it can be kind of scary as a sales rep to hear, hey, Jamie from marketing wants to talk to you about those last 3 calls, or, he picked up on this, why don't you connect and see if there's, something that you can pick up from him or learn to do better. And that is, that's so scary. That's scary in any role. And that's scary in sales. So to have that rapport, to say, hey, this is what I'm overhearing. And for your colleagues to be able to say, my potential client thinks this is odd. Can you take a look at it? That is amazing. I love hearing that.
No, it honestly does work very, very, very well. And one of my previous companies, they used to do, spend a day in the life of another employee, which was great.
Yeah.
But you only saw their day to day for one day ever, and that was it. Whereas, sitting in that department all day, every day. And I think sort of in line with that, I don't know what the setup is at your company or various other companies, but we're all chasing the same revenue figure. So I have a revenue figure that I have to, fuel. The sales guys have a revenue figure that they have to fuel, and we're all aiming for the same figure. Rather than me having, I guess, softer KPIs of you need to give me 100 names, it's you need to be driving revenue. That is the expectation. So we're actually talking about the same goal day to day as well. My goal is the same as the sales guys. I just employ slightly different methods in order to get to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and when I was with HIMS, I was in the Portland, Maine office, and HIMS was actually, they embraced remote work well before COVID. And the main office was actually was originally a publisher that they had acquired. So not a lot of the sales team was based in Maine. Actually, none of the sales team was, but the marketing teams, the operations team, the events teams, and the client success teams were. So I, when I was really like learning about the sales process, I got one thing that I loved about that setup is I got to see the pre-sales and post-sales process up front too. So it was, okay, what does this actually mean after something is sold? Okay, how do we get to this point? How does the events track work to influence that sales track, and to be able to see all these different pieces interacting, it was fantastic. And so I think that that's something that, I mean, obviously this isn't an easy, we're going to start doing it next week. But if there is that level of crossover, if there is something where, hey, the sales team is going to learn XYZ if they spend more time with the events team, or the marketing team's going to learn a bit more if they can connect with, that editorial team or that operations team. There's just so much we can learn from each other in those sorts of environments.
It reminds me of a conversation that we had recently about how you can learn from the people that, I think the example you gave was that you can learn from the people that you're trying to sell to. So on LinkedIn, you're obviously connected. You follow a lot of marketers like myself, and you might notice some trends, or you might notice some really interesting things that you then go and find more information on, which in turn makes your job easier. So is in terms of, sorry, the lights just turned off. There we go. It's back on. But it's in terms of,
you had a great idea.
It's not just like immersing yourself physically amongst people. It's also immersing yourselves digitally as well, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's, and that can be just a really great allegory of like how sales and marketing, should work or could potentially reach a higher level. It's this conversation right here. I'm in sales, you're in marketing. Yeah, it did not, the conversation and the conversation that sparked this relationship and the subsequent conversations, this doesn't necessarily lead to a one-to-one transfer in our worlds, on how we're gold individually. But the conversations that we have and the threads that we engage with and the other connections that we make, I mean, it can, you can't really capture exactly everything, how all of those pieces influence each other. I mean, but they do. It's you're taking part in a greater conversation. You're learning more. You're meeting new people. Heck, you live across the ocean from me, and we only know each other because of social media and the conversations that have built from that. And I think that can be an incredible tool for anybody who's, not just from a personal branding standpoint, but from that sales standpoint. What can you learn from the world and the conversations that are happening around you? And then, how can you kind of capture that and use that to influence what you're doing every day to help reach those goals and KPIs?
And I guess you, in connecting with people and posting and having conversations and things, that could have been a few years ago, that would have been seen as a personal endeavor or something that you just did as a hobby, or even, that's a bit of marketing, that, isn't it? Oh, they do social, they post. Whereas now we're seeing that sales are starting to understand and adopt the methodology of posting online, which has always, I guess, been seen as a bit of a marketing tactic to make their jobs easier.
Yeah, and I mean, it goes. This is funny because this is a conversation that I do have with clients, and then also just like conversations like this. It's not to say that my posting and engaging and commenting is going to completely replace my cold emails and cold calls. No, there's still going to be anytime there's this tactic is dead type of conversation, there's more to it, right? Nothing is ever truly dead. You can be bad at outreach and you could be bad at cold calls. I mean, I've certainly had my share of ones where I did not hit the mark. But all of these tools can really work together. I love, joining a conversation and seeing somebody and saying, oh, wow, this is a really cool company. I'm going to look it up. And then you start learning about it. Okay, great. I'm going to follow it now. Oh, they're posting this really cool content. Oh, wow. I bet, again, I'm in lead generation. Oh, I bet this could actually work really well with this audience. Now there can be more of, that warmer initiation, or even just, I feel like I have a better understanding of how I can potentially, build a personal and business relationship just by, using all of those different opportunities. It's not that, social posting or personal branding is going to completely replace traditional sales tactics, but can they influence and bolster? Oh, absolutely.
So I guess we've sort of covered a few of the main benefits of that synergy between marketing and sales, just in terms of that rapport, just in terms of that evolving the way that you're working, evolving the messaging that you're putting out, the tactics that you're using. Mm-hmm. But are there any other things that you've seen, any things that you do yourself, things that you've been party to, where you've thought that's a really, really nice way of sales and marketing being one team, or sales and marketing working really strongly together?
Yeah. Again, I've always, just personally in my career, I've always made an effort to, have those conversations with the marketing team, learn, see what makes them tick. Just to learn more even about the product or the workplace. So I think it really comes down to that. It's just having that sort of curiosity, and seeing how you can help each other. And again, it may not necessarily be that one-to-one goal, like, oh, I'm going to do this, and this is that direct, I can see the road on how it's going to lead to this outcome. But it goes a long way, again, in building that rapport. And again, I sell to marketers. So if I'm talking to my internal marketing team, I can learn a heck of a lot about like what matters, what matters in your day to day. What is, that question, like what keeps you up at night? It's not personally one of my favorite sales questions, but how, what is it? What is challenging right now? What are you kind of worried about? What do you see? What are you excited? And if you can hear that, then kind of that no pressure, low barrier way, again, talking to your colleagues, be fantastic.
Yeah, no, I think that the point you were making about understanding, I think the question you said was what keeps you up at night, and it is understanding customer pains, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think there's some sort of I think there's a fact. It's only 13% of salespeople, only 13% of buyers believe that salespeople truly understand their needs. And I think there's obviously a huge, 87% opportunity to improve there. But one of the ways that you're going to have a better understanding of your customers' needs is actually talking to people within your network or within your company that are potentially those customers or could potentially be those customers. So in your case, you would speak to the marketing team, and I would speak to the sales team, which is marketing speaking to sales about how to, improve, get better, and in understanding the pains, we can increase our chance of winning, right?
Yeah, and then also, I think I was spoiled in a way because I started my sales career in media, so I had so many brands and newsletters and events that I could just kind of take a peek at and see, okay, what are the trending topics right now? And specifically healthcare IT is where I was, what are these trending topics? What are the editorial staff? What is the editorial staff writing about right now? Who are they interviewing? And that was incredibly powerful too, because there's something to be said for that unbiased outlook that can come from an editorial team. So that is, when I talk to new sales reps, that's something that I like kind of doing on the side through different online channels. That's always my number one recommendation. What's your industry? Oh, my industry is cybersecurity. Great. Here's a list of publications that focus on cybersecurity professionals, and just start reading. Sign up for the newsletters. You don't need to know absolutely everything, but get an idea for the big issues. Because if you can go in and you can talk to, if you get a call with that ICP at cybersecurity, and that right now that that they're in the U.S., there's, congressional movement around mitigating security breaches in healthcare. If you know that, and you can, and you can not necessarily parrot that back or relate it back to your client, but actually have that as a foundation. That's amazing. You can ask better questions. You can get a better idea of, again, what's happening around them, because, we're having these one-to-one conversations and they don't happen in a vacuum. It's what can you do to make sure that you're not in this vacuum, and you have, you just have more information and a better understanding of the world that they live in. That can go a long way.
No, I think it's a very interesting sort of thing you said there about when you have a new sales rep come in, you give them a list of relevant publications so that they can immerse themselves in that market. And I guess those publications potentially would have been handled, executed by a marketing team, unless we're talking I guess, more print media or these old school media houses? Is that what we're talking about? That more like those old school media houses, or are we talking about publications that have been put out by a marketing team?
Yeah, so I mean both. When I old school publications and whether it's their print form, which is going away, or that digital form, that editorial content, you can learn so much from that, from that type of content. But also, to your point, that marketing-led content, that community-led content, that social content, they all play a part. Sometimes that marketing-led content can be a little bit more, not necessarily product focused, but it can be a little bit more niche in terms of, what they want, what they're talking about, and how it can be tied back to an organization. Whereas those old school media houses, they're pulling out unbiased content, reports, interviews from, leaders across the space. And, having both of those sources, can be amazing. I mean, it's a difference of like, getting that big scope and then also niching down to your specific area. If you can say, oh, well, these are the big trends again in cybersecurity, and then my organization is building content and researching around these more, minutia bits. That's you can use those to an incredible advantage. When talking to your client or your internal teams.
Yeah, and it's another great example of how, I guess, immersing yourself. I've used the word already, but immersing yourself in that that sort of marketing world, that marketing content. And if you were completely closed off to like, oh, I'm not going to read those publications, or I'm not going to go and check out that blog or watch those videos that have been put out, then you're closing yourself off to all these resources that are available to you that are going to make you a stronger salesperson. And, ultimately, you're going to be hitting that figure more quickly. So I think what a sort of trend I'm noticing in the last sort of 30 minutes is that communication on any level, whether that be physical communication, whether that be interaction online, whether that be communicating through content, is absolutely key in building better relationships between sales, marketing, CS, production, whatever department it is. But communication is absolutely essential.
Yeah, and I mean, it sounds kind of simple, right? It sounds kind of funny, like ending on the like, hey, communication matters, but it does, and there are the different levels. I like being active on LinkedIn for some reason. It is the platform that I feel the least inhibited. I will like jump on threads and it's like, oh, this is interesting. I'm going to add, or oh, I'm going to ask a question here. And that has been fantastic. I love reading again, the blogs and the content that the marketing team I work with puts out. I've read your blog, and I've been following this podcast. It's just, I think curiosity, when you talk about your sales skills and soft skills that can get you far, I think curiosity is one of the key ones. And if you're not curious and asking why or how, I think you're kind of missing out.
And that curiosity, that trait, is something that ideally you want to be looking for in your marketers or your sales people, to fuel that, right? To fuel that ideal behavior that you're looking for. Yeah.
And actually that came up on one of my colleagues had mentioned that on a call a couple of days ago. It's we all work with marketers, and just by the type of work you guys are doing, I mean, it just lends itself to being creative and curious. And because it's, what are you doing? You're building something. you're talking about something, you're getting complete strangers excited about something that really have no business being excited about in any other facet of their life. And that's really cool. Like, tap into that.
Now, have you got a hard stop?
No.
That you've.
Sorry, I said that. No, I don't actually. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Like I said, I can cut these little bits out where I ask sort of like producer questions or whatever. But I think we've gone sort of around the houses in talking about I guess different tactics or different ways in which companies might be set up, or that relationship between marketing and sales. But like I said, that the general theme that seems to be coming through here is that communication is key. So I guess the takeaway is that one of the best things that you could do if you work in marketing or in sales in order to improve that relationship is go and sit in each other's areas permanently if you can. And if you can't, then you need to be actively building that relationship daily, weekly, whatever it is, so that you are on the same page, you're reading off the same hymn sheet, you're aiming for the same goals, so that as a cross-departmental function, as a company, you can be chasing that revenue figure that ultimately we're all being paid to do. Yeah,
I agree with that.
Amazing. I think, unfortunately, I have got a hard stop, so we will have to end this episode here. But I do want to say that we're merely scratching the surface here, and I'm sure we will catch up tomorrow and talk about what we will be sort of chatting about on the next episode, and I'm sure there is plenty more to come. But no, thank you for the 48-minute chat that we have had about that sort of relationship between marketing and sales. But it's been very interesting from my sort of side of things to have that conversation.
Yeah, of course. And I'm always willing to chat this or casually messages, whatever. It's that's how I got into sales. I think it's fun to just talk to different people and just share ideas. That's why I do it.
Brilliant. And that's a very nice sort of thing to say at the end, is that when you're working in sales, it's great to chat and to be curious and to communicate, which is sort of what we seem to have sort of touched on for the last 49 minutes now.
49 minutes now.
No, thank you for listening. Thank you for listening. We will see you in the next episode, and I'm sure you will see Kristen back on another episode as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jamie.